I'm live. Hey, this is Doggy Rita. I'm Sweet Gwendolyn, and this is Queer Quarantine. Day 25, which is Wednesday, April 15th, to be exact. I guess normally taxes would be due right around now. That's one thing I don't have to think about right now. Hey, everyone. I feel great. As a disabled person, I am actually having a good health day, which does not happen that often. So I have to run, shoot a video, document the moment. It's great. Oh, I almost forgot to mention we got a kitty cat. Oh, pardon the mess. We got a kitty cat over here. It's actually my roommate's cat. She decided to join us today. She hangs out on the side of the house sometimes too. But anyway, yay. Yeah, so I actually feel awesome right now. That's cool. So, let's seize the moment. Oh, hi. Let's seize the moment. I mean, honestly, my ideal would be to do these like almost every day and just crank them out and keep them shorter because I feel like, can be a little long. It's a little bit of a time investment. And, but that I just like to, because as much as I'm doing this for other people, I'm also doing this for myself. So 20 years from now, I can be like, I lived through a major thing in world history. What was that like? And kind of watch this and see how it unfolds. So I try to cover all the major points that are going on. But anyway, so I am going to do what I always do, which is start out with the more serious stuff first. And that way, anyone who is watching this for the sake of, maybe the lighter stuff or the how's Gwendolyn doing? Oh, yeah, before I forget, I am going to review a book I finished and loved, which is Just Kids by Patti Smith at the end. So if you just want to stick around for the Patti Smith book review, go ahead and jump to the end. But anyway, I try and put like the more potentially depressing, depending on where you're coming from, news at the beginning. So I'm going to start out with the numbers, the hard numbers, and then I'm going to start moving into into the the news related to the virus, and to the extent there's news not related to the virus or just any sort of more offbeat news of the weird related to the virus or cool stuff where people are helping and stepping up to the plate. That'll go towards the end, and then I'll do the personal stuff at the very end. So, all right, if you don't want to hear all the raw numbers and everything, just skip ahead or mute if you're watching live for a couple of minutes, and we'll get to the political stuff and the lighter stuff. So, the raw numbers. Okay, so today we unfortunately passed the 2 million cases worldwide point. That is also with 134,000 plus dead worldwide. In the US, we have just under 650,000 infected and 28,500 dead. Also, I should say, when I say the infected numbers, that doesn't mean everyone is infected at this second. That's how many people have been infected since it began. So some of those people have since recovered. In Texas, there are 15,500 infected and 364 dead. And that's right, I had trouble getting the numbers for Travis County, and I forgot to go back and get them before I popped in today. But when I checked yesterday, it was in the 800s for infected, and I forget what the number of dead was, but I think it was in the very low teens. So yeah, it's still dealing with some numbers. One of the reasons the number of dead in the US jumped so much is that New York City's death toll just went up stat-wise, it went up 3,700 because they started recording the deaths of people who hadn't been officially diagnosed, because they had like 8 times as many deaths compared to what they normally have, and it was obviously related to the virus. So they went in and looked into it and added 3,700, and they're going to be counting the deaths that appear to be corona related from here on out. That number very unfortunately put New York City's, and this is just one city, their death toll up at 10,000. So, and I hear that in New York City, they're obviously taking the lockdown very seriously there. So it's just, it's completely quiet except for the constant sound of ambulance sirens. So that is a very tough place to be living right now. Also, speaking of numbers, 9,000 healthcare workers have contracted the virus so far, but that's assumed to be a hugely underreported number. But it really brings home the point that they are on the front lines. And also, disturbingly, the virus has hit 3,300 nursing homes and killed over 5,000 nursing home patients. But that doesn't even count 17 states that are not required to report their corona cases. So that number is obviously really low. So getting away from the hard numbers, the big battle in the country right now is over reopening the country because essentially there seem to be two different motivations the Republicans have for wanting to open it up. Trump, he's already said he thinks that anyone who doesn't want him to reopen the country is doing it because they don't want him to be reelected, because if the country's not reopened, the economy's bad. And there's just this known statistic that basically every president that is an incumbent that has a good economy since, I don't know, somewhere in the 20th century, a way back, they're always reelected, and all the incumbent presidents that had bad economies were all voted out. So the only thing he can wrap his mind around in all of this is that if he doesn't restart the economy right away, then because of this statistical rule, he's going to be voted out. And it's just like not clicking with him that if he has this high body count because he horribly mismanaged it, or people see him as shoving, the worker bees at the bottom of the totem pole, shoving them out the door prematurely for the sake of a buck. He doesn't think that's going to affect his reelection chances, but he doesn't. He's literally not thinking that far ahead. I love this mug. Anyway, the other reason is just that's Trump's personal motivation. The other reason is just the rest of the Republicans are just bald-faced greedy. They don't care if the worker bees die. They want to make their bucks. We just need to accept some people are going to die. Oh, there's the kitty cat. Rita loves sniffing that kitty's butt. That's just her favorite thing in the world. Luckily for her, the cat tolerates it. But anyway, where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. So then everyone else is just bald-faced greedy. And then Trump is essentially giving them permission. And there was this weird thing the other day where day before yesterday, where Trump just shy declared himself king. Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. I think my roommate's home. The cat wants to go say hi. All right. Let me help you out here with my opposable thumbs. All right. Problem resolved. And there's a happy kitty cat. Anyway, Trump, he really did almost declare himself king. He did not use the word, but he was just like, I am the ultimate authority on when we open this country, and I can tell the governors that they have to open up their states whether they want to or not. And it was just really weird. It wasn't like just one. I know he spouts off these weird glib things, but he was really kind of going nuts about it. It was like, that is the first time I felt the chills of I think this guy is serious about trying to take over. A lot of people have had a lot of concerns about the November election, especially if he loses and refuses to leave, or that he'll use the pandemic as an excuse to try and, cancel the elections. So I don't know. That was alarming. He did actually back down. He actually got pushback from a lot of Republicans on that, because there are Republican governors out there as well as Democrats, and they did not appreciate him trying to tell them what to do in their own states. So let's see. And then on the positive side of this, not everyone is completely crazy about that stuff. The California just unveiled their plan for how they're going to go about doing it. It doesn't, because they're intelligent, include any hard deadlines for when it needs to be reopened by. They have the novel idea of using science and experts and public safety as guides for when they will lift it. But it's stuff like once they feel like they have the availability of testing, because obviously you want to just test everyone before you send them back to work, and the ability to trace their contacts and test those people and alert them they might have been exposed. Testing is definitely the key to reopening the economy, which I am in favor of, but not until it can be done safely. And they specifically in there had they won't reopen until they feel like they're able to protect the most vulnerable members of society, and that there needs to be a clear mechanism for being able to close things back down again if need be. There were several other things, but on the whole, it was like bizarrely rational. Awesome. I love it. Oh, and also they're partnering with other states, and actually both on the East and West Coast, a number of states are, I can't remember what they call it, essentially forming alliances with each other so that they'll be coordinating regionally on when to reopen, which is, it'll make it less of a scattershot patchwork and should hopefully be more effective. Also, just in weird Trump news, he retweeted something suggesting that he should fire Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci being the one person that everyone in the country, except for a few conspiracy theorists, trust in this epidemic. He's served under 5 different presidents as the infectious disease expert. He's completely non-partisan. And what happened was, I think 2 days ago, a reporter, because he's doing near daily press conferences with Trump, and a reporter asked him if he thought that if they'd shut the country down earlier, it would have helped. And he's like, well, I don't think anyone would argue that it couldn't have helped, but we are where we're at. We got to deal with the reality on the ground. Very diplomatic, didn't make a thing out of it. And Trump's fans just went nuts. How dare he imply that Trump's response was anything less than perfect? You know how he does a lot of perfect things, perfect phone calls, perfect whatever. So anyway, yes, the suggestion that his handling the pandemic was less than perfect led for people to call for him to be fired, and then Trump retweeted it as a shot across the bow at him. And he also is halting the U.S. funding of the World Health Organization, which is exactly as bad an idea during a pandemic as it sounds like. But since he is definitely starting to get some heat for how he's been handling the crisis, he, needs a scapegoat. So, oh, it wasn't me. It was the World Health Organization. They mishandled things. I will say I feel like they did a few things wrong, but I think everyone did. And it doesn't change that they are honestly the best. They're literally what's coordinating so much of the global response. I think they're doing the best they can. I don't think they did any sort of major screw up. The main thing I remember is, disagreeing with is that they were skeptical as to if the virus could be transmitted as an aerosol, basically by speaking and just breathing it out as opposed to little drops of spittle. I don't know. It's weird. And also actually back on the reopening note, so get this, there are 5 states that's never even issued the shelter in place order to have, on the books to come back, to open up from. And South Dakota is one of them. and they had a poultry plant where 500 workers, or sorry, pork plant, processing plant, where 500 workers at this plant got coronavirus. And she's still like, oh, well, it just goes to show it's fine that we don't have it in place because they're essential workers. So it wouldn't have mattered anyway. But it's like, if you had had the shelter in place, the measures might have been in place to prevent them from getting sick and then infecting all their coworkers. And also social distancing guidelines in the workplace have, gone along with all the other shelter in place orders. And then also, speaking of states totally screwing everything up, Florida actually removed its attorney general from the stage of a press conference right after he said that we'll probably have to keep social distancing and wearing a mask for a year or so until a vaccine is developed. And as soon as he says it, some handlers come out, talk to him. He's like, okay. And then he walks off the stage, certainly seeming like they were whisking him away because I'm sure that's not Florida's stance. Florida has had their fingers in their ears, head in the sand more than almost any other state. And they later put out a statement saying, oh, no, it wasn't that. It's just that the governor just needed to talk to him, apparently right at that moment, and had to have him pulled off the stage in front of cameras right after saying something that the governor almost definitely didn't like. So anyway, let me see. I think I covered most of the news. Oh, all right. So here's one news of the weird thing, which is that Trump is going to make his name appear on all of the stimulus checks they're sending to all of us. This has never happened in all of American history, but he wants his name on it. And they're like, you realize you don't sign the checks from the Treasury. And no, he wants his name on it. So they're literally putting his name in the memo field. Sorry. He's probably upset they couldn't put it in gold ink. Sorry, that one just got me. All right. So I'm sorry. I haven't really had a good laugh in a while, and something was funnier about saying it out loud than just reading it inside my head. Okay. In other good news, people stepping up to the plate, sports teams are actually giving their rain ponchos to hospitals so that they can use them as surgical gowns because they're running very low on personal protective equipment. And I think there was something else. Oh, yes. Wonderful news in Virginia. They passed some awesome legislation. They passed sweeping LGBTQIA plus non-discrimination bills, which basically makes both queer and trans Jackson holidays that basically racists would use for Confederate and white pride marches down the street. So yay, they got rid of it. Yay. No more honoring slave owners who fought to maintain slavery. So I think that is that for the news, and I am going to give you a quick update on just how I'm doing and then give you my book report. So how am I doing? I'm doing well. As I mentioned, I'm having a great health day, and I went for a really nice walk this morning, and I finally got up my guts, and I went to a food trailer, and because I've been avoiding any sort of contact, but I figure that way I don't have to go in or touch any doorknobs or whatever. So it was pretty contact free, apart from I'm touching a bag and ultimately aluminum foil that they touched, but I just put it on a plate, didn't touch my face, washed my hands immediately afterwards, and it was nice to have something I didn't cook, although I've been on such a cooking tear and I love it. I'm gonna cook some big batches of stuff tonight. And outside of that, I don't know, worked on my Spanish. Oh, I assembled a table in my backyard that I'm gonna put my plants on. Of course, I can't buy any plants right now, but luckily I have a few survivors from my move. I have 2 survivors, and they're both succulents, so they'll be getting some good sun. And I also have 2 orchids. One was a housewarming gift from my mom, and one, because I like that so much, I got as a quarantine thing to just brighten things up a bit. And that was most of my day. So now for my book report. I cannot say enough really great things about those. Here it is, up close. So, what this is about, let me start by telling you who the 2 principal people are in it, if you're not familiar with either Patti Smith or Robert Mapplethorpe. So, Patti Smith, she's still alive and active now, but she was a very, very, very influential singer who got very big in the 70s. She sort of married poetry and rock and roll, and she had the Patti Smith Band. And she was originally lovers and then just like lifelong best friends with Robert Mapplethorpe. He is, I would personally say, incorrectly known as a gay artist because they were really physically intimate and had plenty of sex for quite a while. So he's obviously super queer, but I don't think gay is the right word. There's so much bi erasure in the world. So I am not going to erase his apparent biness. Unfortunately, he is not with us to tell us now that we have more names for things, because unfortunately he died of AIDS in 1989. And so who Robert Mapplethorpe was, so he was an incredibly noteworthy, world famous, but based in New York City artist who, for the record, did lots of art outside of what he is most notorious for, but what he is extremely well known for was he did a lot of very high-end, like high art BDSM, like hardcore BDSM photos. And so what happened was, I mean, believe me, people definitely commented. I'm sure he had plenty of people who didn't approve during his life. But about 100 days after he died, Jesse Helms, a horrible human being who was openly racist, who was in the, I forget if he was, I'm pretty sure he was a senator, either that a congressman. But anyway, if you were not alive or at least old enough to be aware of it in the 80s, but especially the early 90s, there were all of these Republicans that went on this big moral crusade against the arts, especially the funding, like government funding of the NEA, the National Endowment of the Arts. And so it was just like your classic, oh, all this pornography is horrible. We need to look at it, as much of it as possible, so we can be really sure about how offensive it is. And so it was sort of, that was sort of its own thing with the Meese Commission looking at pornography, but they definitely were sort of the same with all the offensive art. Oh my God, this art's so explicit. Oh, it's so wrong. Show me more. So Robert Mapplethorpe was essentially Exhibit A for them as far as how offensive they thought his art was and why there shouldn't be funding of art in America. He was very famous and had been like in the Whitney and like all the really major institutions of the world. So he was a very remarkable person. And honestly, I did not really care that much about Patti Smith. I mean, I knew who she was and I respected her role in history and everything. She definitely kicked open a lot of doors for a lot of women and with a lot of force. But her music, to the extent I'd heard it, didn't really do a lot for me. I'm not super into her poems, not because I mean, I'm sure they were fine. I'm just not really big on poetry, which often kind of comes off as just like dramatic talking to me, which I don't want to be unkind, because I do recognize that there are some very, very, very good poets in the world, but it's not just not like I can appreciate it when it is done well, but it's just not something I seek out. It's probably the best way to put it. So, but I did not know until this book came out 10 years ago that she had been like just attached at the hip, connected with Robert Mapplethorpe. I mean, they really, 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 really loved each other. And I bought the book a while ago. It was on my to read pile for a long time, and I finally got around to it. Oh, and also the thing that's so great about the book, I'm still talking about who they were, but the book is just, oh my God, it's so readable. And it's great. You could read it over months, or you could read it in just a couple of sittings, because the way it's written is it's sort of like, it's just like a very long series of anecdotes. So you could easily just read like 2 or 3 pages, and she just tells like a story about a thing that happened that was cool or interesting. Or you could, excuse me, or you could sit down and read for hours about all these things that happen. And also, and I like that she did it without being like super name dropping, because it wasn't, she was just there and knew all these people. But yeah, I mean, a lot of very remarkable people who were just in her life are in the book, including I was the most excited about Jane County, but also, of course, Wayne County at the time, before she had changed her name. And Candy Darling, Hollywood Lawn, Jackie Curtis, Jimi Hendrix, just like all sorts of. William Burroughs is in the book. Yeah, just like, because the two of them lived in the Chelsea Hotel, where so many of these really, noteworthy people were at the time. So, anyway, in short, this is National Book Award winner. See, it's not just me; other people like it too. I remember it was a #1 New York Times bestseller when it came out. So anyway, this was hands down the best book I have read in a very long time. Cannot possibly say enough nice things about it. So if you're looking for a good read during your quarantine, queer or otherwise, I recommend it highly. Anyway, I think that is it. I'm going to go with my goal of finally ending one of these gracefully. So it's been good talking to you, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye. It's not ending. Knew it. I don't know why. It doesn't help that it's like a 2-step process. I have to hit end stream and ask me if I'm sure, and I'm sure. I just said I was sure. I'm trying this again. Bye-bye.